You can listen in either through your phone line or through your computer. The audio tab allows you to choose which either one. Due to the large size of today's webinar, lines will be automatically muted, but questions are encouraged. We ask that you please use the question and answer feature to ask questions throughout the webinar. We'll be taking questions at the end due to our full agenda. As a 501c3 nonprofit, the Curbside Value Partnership is subject to various antitrust rules. We need to just make sure that we don't talk about pricing, costs, customers, business plans, any pieces like that. We have an outstanding group of speakers here today, and CVP is so appreciative of them taking their time and lending their expertise to help bring you some excellent information before we all break for the hodidays. We have Mike Pope. Mike is the Director of Procurement for Sunoco Recycling. He's out of Hartsville, South Carolina. We have Benjamin Pedego. I apologize. I probably just messed that up, Ben. But he's Corporate Recycling Sales Coordinator for Rumpke in Cincinnati, Ohio. We have Phil Brazzi, who is the Recycling Director for the City of Philadelphia. We have Jason Hale, who's Senior Consultant with Resource Recycling Systems. I'm Karen Bandhauer, and Keith Harrison, our Executive Director, are on the line representing CVP. Today's PDF slides will not be available just due to the nature of the presentation. It would be very hard to look at the slides and understand exactly what's being shared, but we are recording the webinar and could make the recording available for those who would like to listen to it after the fact. So just a little bit of framing before we jump in. Today we'll be discussing, as I mentioned, contamination, which, as we think about it, is really this intersection of quality and value. And we're talking about it in Mythbuster style, so we hope this will be a very fun and engaging webinar. We want to think about this in terms of the value of recyclables when they're sold in spec bales. And when you think about the value of recyclables and what value they get, what value is placed on those by the marketplace when they're sold in their bales, that's determined in large part by the quality of those materials. And quality really relates to two factors. Did the right things go into the bin or the cart when the consumer first made the choice of recycling a material? And were those things prepared properly so that they aren't contaminated and that they don't contaminate anything else in a commingled stream? So are they empty? Are they dry? In the coming year, CVP will develop resources to tackle this problem. Contamination is sort of like those white elephant gifts that come wrapped up in multiple layers of paper just to make it extra fun for the people that are unwrapping those. And so we're going to start peeling away at the contamination issue. We've started to do that through our newsletters. We're going to do it a little bit more through this webinar, and then we'll do it through resources that are in the Our Work section of our website, and we direct everyone to take a look at those after the webinar to get a few more ideas. And then we'll be developing, as I mentioned, some additional resources in the coming year that continue to pull these pieces apart and understand them a bit more. So before we start, just the fine print, these myths are not all inclusive of all the issues. Rather, they are representative of many of those big ones that we hear about a lot. Our speakers are going to do a great job of digging into them and pulling out some of those kind of sub-issues and challenges that many of you hear about in your daily jobs. And then we ask you through the question function at the end of the webinar, did we miss anything? If we did, let us know, and perhaps we'll do a round two. At the end, we'll also be doing a poll that we hope everyone engages in, where we'll be looking at some examples that were sent to us leading up to this webinar of how communities have tackled contamination. And we'll ask for your feedback and input on which ones you think dealt with it best. And the winner will receive a gift card from CVP. So now let's go ahead and get started. So on the first day of recycling mass, my true love brought to me, busting the 12 big myths of MRF. So with this first myth of yes or no, how clean is clean, or do I need to run my recyclables through the dishwasher prior to putting them in the bin or cart, we'll go ahead and get started with Phil. Phil, you may be on mute.
Hi, Karen. Thanks.
Hey, yep.
So in Philadelphia, we recommend that residents just empty and rinse, with empty being the key word, and that's where the emphasis is. And so we certainly don't want, half full jars of mayonnaise and things like that in our blue bins. And I do think that there are some cities that have some level of sensitivity to recommending that residents do rinsing. I think one example is I think there's at least one city in Southern California that is now recommending that residents wipe containers rather than rinse due to potential water shortages. So not sure if that helps or not.
It does. Ben and Mike, you may have some ideas here.
Well, I wanted to point out, Karen, that with some of the new optical scanning equipment specific to plastics, there may be difficulty with scanners being able to identify plastics because of the weight of a plastic with food or with liquid. So just wanted to bring that to the attention of the folks that are listening.
And this is Mike as well. It certainly is something that we want to look for is clean materials based on what Karen said earlier around quality, but it's really not the biggest issue that we see today. It's more around some of the other materials that can cause a problem in the process of how the MRF operates that become a bigger concern than the cleanliness of the materials themselves.
Oh, and just so we can all weigh in on the first one, this is Jason, and thinking about what we just heard, it seems like everybody has pretty simple suggestions around this. They're saying, we heard this isn't necessarily the biggest issue we've got, but simple instructions, simply rinse and go or what have you. So a lot of people are going with very simple instructions like clean and dry, and not spending a lot of real estate on your signage and on your materials, talking about in depth how to prepare the material. Just go with something very simple, just going to work for you. People are busy. They don't have time to look at a lot of stuff. So if it gets the job done in 3 words, that's a really good practice. So think about what those words are for you. Clean and dry is one a lot of folks are using, and that might help you out when you're planning your next marketing upgrade. So just a thought.
Thank you for that. We've been batting around a lot. Empty, rinse, and recycle. Clean and dry is another good one, but just keeping messaging really simple and to the point there. So myth number 2, I think, Ben, you were going to take this on. Metal's metal, right? If cans can go in, so can pans.
Well, Karen, the issues that we're seeing, especially with more mechanized single-stream systems, is looking at steel cans only, looking at aerosol cans, steel cans. Screen systems can be disabled with large metal objects, and I think that you and your staff have done a great job putting together some visuals for participants in the webinar. Safety issues come to mind, Karen, with non-conforming materials introduced into the recycling system. The mechanization has really can cause some problems with large items. So I hope these photos are instructive to the participants.
I think they are, Ben. Anything else that any of our other panelists would like to add here?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in. This is Jason again, and just thinking about it from a communications perspective. I mean, if you're looking at these pictures like I am, and you're thinking about the safety hazards, these bulky metals are, in the big deal, little deal scheme of things, they're a big deal for MRFs, and everything can't be a big deal. There aren't that many things I think a MRF would say, gosh, that is really a problem. And this is typically going to be one of them, these bulky metals. And so looking at how you can address that with your residents, one just very simple, tried and true means of doing that is simply an OOPS card. You probably have some sort of quality mechanism in your collection scheme. It may be having your driver get out and check every 20th bin or cart. It may be driving to routes in advance of your collection vehicle every few weeks and taking a peek in some of the bins. And when you see something like these items, you might just leave behind a simple card that has a few key things that you think really might cause problems and check off the one that's in there. And honestly, it's just been proven to work is the short of it. But one thing to remember, that's a whole lot of negative. Don't do this other thing, don't do this thing as well. And studies have shown that you really need to include some positive messaging as well. You know, a thank you for recycling kind of a thing, because that's going to engage people better. It's going to leave them feeling in the long run better about recycling, and you really need that for sustained participation in your program. And for that matter, I think CBP has a great one that hits those points. It gives an example of the types of materials that are really big deals. And on the flip side of the thing, it has a really nice positive message thanking people for doing their part. So just thinking the messaging side of things, and freaked out by the picture.
This is Keith, and I just want to say you're right. In our last newsletter, we included that OOP card artwork there for people to download, and folks can look forward to CVP having more of that in the future. If you need us to resend that OOPS card, our email will be at the end of this. How about glass, Karen?
Hey, this is Phil. Can I just go back to, and make a point on that last slide? I think that this is sort of the type of thing where having video or having some sort of interactive tool that shows people the inner workings of a MRF can be really helpful. You know, I usually try to tell people that MRFs are really only equipped to sort flat things and round things, and you know that's sort of too abstract, I think. So I think these types of images, as well as images of MRFs in action, can be really valuable tools, and I think can really help drive these messages home.
That's an excellent point. Okay, so now going on to glass. Is glass glass? Isn't it? Just glass? Let's see, Mike.
As with any materials, there are certainly differences in the source and in the types and the quality. And glass is certainly at the bottom end in terms of economic value when you look at all the other materials that are coming through a single stream program. Obviously, aluminum is at one end of the spectrum, and then you've got the residue that you've got to deal with on the other end, and glass is certainly near the bottom of that. So really, it depends a lot on what local markets and options that you've got available to you. So it's very important to work with the MRF operator or with the markets that are around you to understand how that works, because there is no one answer for everywhere. But certainly with different types of glass, automotive or window glass is significantly different than containers, etc., that we need to be very clear on what glass can go through the system in the process and what can be done with it at the end. Very similar to all the other comments and discussions we've had around quality and consistency of what comes into the MRF in the first place.
Well, I think that's an excellent point, Mike, and I think it raises this issue that your MRF success leads to the local program's recycling program success, that in order for programs to be successful, they need successful MRFs. And so working closely with the MRF, and this relates back to Phil's point as well about educating residents about what is actually happening in the MRF and having some good communication there is really important. And CBP did release a tool recently through its newsletter about how to communicate with your MRF, a survey to help really get to the core issues that are going on with the MRF that might be causing problems, and ultimately relate back to bottom line, to value through that MRF. Phil, would you like to add anything?
No, I think that you all covered it pretty well.
Okay.
Karen, this has been Pettigo. If I could just add something, we
Absolutely.
look at municipal solid waste, glass representing 3.7% by weight. We're seeing glass in curbside and in drop-off programs by weight being 15 to 20%. So it is a significant landfill diversion. I know there's challenges across the nation about handling glass, but I just want to encourage the participants, the webinar participants, to take a look at this. We're looking in Europe, glass diversion 65, 70%. So but just don't give up on glass.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ben. Okay, plastics. This is one that always creates issues. This seems to be one of the biggest questions that comes up. Plastic is just plastic. If it has those little arrows on the bottom, we can put it in the bin. Keith, you want to talk to this one?
Yeah, the little arrows were never designed to be an education tool, though many people do use them to try and communicate what can and can't go in the bin. I think it's important to note that the resin identification code, that number in the bottom, tells what a material was made from, not necessarily what a material can be made into. So when we, CBP's best management practice, though, does encourage communities that we work with to explore if it's the right time to move beyond bottles. Polypropylene recycling, rigid non-bottle, plastic container recycling is growing. The domestic marketplace for it is hungry. There's a lot of opportunities and ability for MRFs to begin to trust these end markets and expand what they can accept and process. So we, in the cities with whom we partner, we always encourage actively looking at the expansion, with the exception, careful exception of one thing. And I think on the next slide we can see what that is. That's film. Unless a MRF is actively encouraging communities to use the curbside collection as a film collector, and there are a few out there, film is a major headache in the MRF marketplace. You can see here, this is the initial star screen, and that's intended to separate the containers from the paper. And when plastic bags, when otherwise known as film, gets in there, they get just completely entangled in that material. Jason, I wanted to hear about some of the yes-no concepts behind marketing and messaging that our webinar participants can use.
Hey, Keith, I want to tell you about them. That sounds like fun. Yeah, so, you know, like you said, people are probably going to be after containers. They're probably, most MRFs aren't going to be super happy about the film and the plastic bags in their systems. They're good with everything else. I mean, any kind of container, including the cap, is probably good. So the first step, though, make sure you know what you're talking about by talking to your MRF. And really, I would say I'm going to hit on 5 quick points, and that's the first one. You don't want to educate your residents incorrectly, so just talk to your MRF and clarify, drill down what's okay and what is actually causing the problems. You see that picture of the star screen. Most places probably have those kind of problems with film right now. Then look at messaging to the public. And when you're doing that, again, keep it as simple as possible with the residents. And a number I come back to lately is attention spans are shorter than ever. They're down to about 8 seconds on average, so people aren't taking a lot of time to look at things and absorb them. So if you're really after those plastic containers, say so on your signage. Say so on every public-facing collateral you put together. And if caps are okay, which they probably are, make sure they're present on the containers that you're depicting in your signage. So just make sure you're up front and center on that. Hitting into the third thing, if these plastic bags and film are a major issue for your MRF, think about putting them on your no list. And we all have our list of here's the materials we accept. And a lot of us have a no list. Sometimes it's pretty dang long. Really kind of the way of thinking about it nowadays is try and keep that list as short as possible, just those big deal items. Remember that bit about being positive. We got to stay there. Philadelphia did a really good job of this. They said, you know, we're really going to represent our yes items, and Phil can speak to this better than I can since he's the one who came up with it, but they used images to cover their yes items, so it's a much more dominant thing that people see. And then for their few no items, they just listed them in text. So I thought that was a really great way to embrace this idea of focusing on the positive, getting people to do what you want them to do, and hit the materials you're really looking for. The last 2 quick pieces, I already talked about an oops card. Plastic bags and film are another one of those big deal items that probably belong on your oops card. And if you're really having a problem with a particular item like film and bags, consider running a material-specific campaign to people so that they understand this is a big deal, but you're not making it the major focus of your stuff. So there's a whole bunch of stuff to think about.
So, Jason, can I take the baton from you? This is Phil, and I think it's pretty clear that plastics have confounded local government recycling coordinators for more than 20 years, and I think even programs that moved away from the rosin ID code system to all plastic bottles or all plastic containers even 10 or 15 years ago, I think that they still struggle to bring clarity to plastics recycling rules. And so one thing that I would concede, though, too, is that I think that sort of the addition of 3 through 7s or the mixed rigid plastics over the last few years, I think maybe sort of one of the unintended consequences has been we've probably brought in some more non-recyclable plastics into our stream. Mm-hmm. So I think plastics clearly, especially plastics, how we communicate about that is a continual work in progress. And I guess the other thing I'd say is so much stuff is made out of plastic now that it's impossible for local coordinators to ID every conceivable plastic recyclable material. So we really need to strike that balance between promoting what we accept and keeping out the bad stuff. And that's, again, that's going to be a challenge.
Well, I think, Phil, this is Keith. That's a great point. And I've worked personally on this for years. But CVP is right in the middle of a couple of ongoing projects for next year. One would be working on contamination, this bigger issue. But as part of that, a sub task of that drive is working on what is the common suite? What are the new norms of recycling? And it really gets to this point of what can we trust for in-market so we can start to build some consistency. I'd flag that plastics recycling has changed so much over the years because the industry has grown and matured. And that's, while it keeps recycling coordinators and local officials on your toes, it's a good thing. It means that the industry is working very hard to be as inclusive as possible. As technology improves, so do improved opportunities. So that's why ongoing education to understand the current state of the recycling opportunities out there is important. What I think you should demand, what recycling coordinators should demand, is that groups like CVP give them clear and better tools to help create that consistency. Just Keith. This morning, there was a meeting of various groups all working on this plastic recycling issue, and the meeting was entirely around how do we, who's working on which piece, how do we make sure that no gaps are filled, and then how do we share what we know between us. And so I think that's a step in the right direction of getting more industry-wide consistency back to the recycling community, which is the start of this recovery supply chain.
That's great. I agree.
Keith?
Yeah.
This has been Pettigo here. I just wanted to point out, at least in the Midwest, there are retail stores handling plastic bag. They have viable programs. So I just wanted to let folks know that, yeah, there may be a program where you could redirect folks that want to recycle plastic bags to a retail store.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so if a bags place is not necessarily in the MRF, then a bags place is through a secondary recovery mechanism that's in place. And those store to in-market programs are often very good. I'd also encourage people to check out American Chemistry Council, ACC's WRAP program. And they are providing resources for communities who want to give their residents more options for recycling plastic film, but not in the bin.
So I think these are all excellent points. And in the interest of time, I want to move us on. But before I do, I just want to clarify, we've been throwing around a lot of acronyms. MRF is a material recovery facility. We had a couple questions about that. And this has generated a lot of questions that I hope we can get to at the end. I think we could do a whole nother webinar just on the plastics piece. Okay, so myth number 5, to peel or not to peel? That is the question. Jason.
Oh man, I love it. I love it. I'm cornier than you are, so look out. But I guess this is one that when I get a resident that asks me this kind of a question, I get pretty excited, because anybody who's willing to get granular enough to say, hey, should I peel the label? I'm cool with that. I'll do that. I think that's somebody who's engaged enough to really participate well. And so, first off, no need. There's no need to peel the labels off of anything. They cause really no problems at all throughout the system. So that's the short and simple answer. And so for general messaging, you probably don't really need to worry about it too much. Go back to your rinse and recycle or clean and dry or what have you. On your signage, just like we talked about with the containers and the caps, make sure those labels generically are on your imagery so that it reinforces that, yeah, you don't have to really worry about it. But again, anybody who would ask that is probably engaged enough to check things out a little bit further. So one way to go is on your website, and Phil kind of hit on this technique earlier, but on your website have a little more information. So here's the general stuff that we take, and one click in or a bit farther down on the page, here is more detail on more specifics about questions that might come up, FAQs, and you can hit on it there, give them a little more of a glimpse for those super engaged folks.
Okay. Then, unless there's any additions there, I'll move us along to myth number 6. All right, the stringy stuff. I know we talked about the plastic bags before, so we don't need to get into that as much, but especially during the holidays, the cords, the Christmas lights, the hoses. Ben, Mike, Phil, what do you think about those? We'll start with Ben.
Well, Karen, I think the issues that we're seeing with new MRFs, with screen systems, the issue with things getting tangled up. You had a good, we have some good visuals here of a star screen, and separation systems are very sophisticated, Karen, and these types of materials not only can shut down a facility, but safety issues with personnel having to deal with this material. You know, we put 12 pre-sorters up front when Singlestream Materials are introduced into the Cincinnati MRF to handle materials to divert this type of material from going into the system. It can really be a significant issue shutting down a MRF for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Mike. Certainly from an operational standpoint and the economics of having to take the downtime, it really becomes a big safety issue as well. You saw earlier pictures around the bags with operators having to physically go in and cut this material out. So it's an unsafe condition to begin with, or a risky condition, I guess, to begin with, working in these screen areas. But then also something like a hose or wire that gets wrapped around can store energy as it's caught up in there too. So it is something that from an economic standpoint has an impact, but just as much as that is the impact on the safety of the individuals that are working in the facility, and making sure that we're doing all we can to protect them and allow them to be successful in their work, and obviously be with their family at the end of the day as well.
Mm-hmm.
This is Phil, and I think one other thing that I'd like to mention is that Philadelphia, we have a curbside recycling program that delivered almost 130,000 tons of material in our last fiscal year, and there really aren't a lot of MRFs around the country that can handle and process that capacity. So, so when a MRF has to shut down, 2 hours every shift just to clear out plastics and plastic bags and wires and things like that, it does sort of, I think, sort of put even more of a damper on sort of the ability for a facility to fully process all the stuff that we might be able to deliver in a given day. So it has operational impacts for cities.
And Phil, you shared with us an approach that Philadelphia uses, especially around the holidays, where you do see to see more of those stringy materials.
Yeah, we try to use holidays as reasons to promote our program, and sort of with these holidays, we try to sort of identify the things that are perhaps generated more during the holidays, and as well as the things that should go in the bin as well as stay out of the bin. And so I don't think we caught Christmas lights on this particular flyer, but we did catch it in some of our radio ads that we did and PSAs that we did. So again, it's a feature of our outreach every holiday season.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that with us. So myth number 7. Here's a material type that's showing up more and more on the aisles of our grocery stores, aseptic cartons. Are they recyclable? They have different layers of material. What can we do about those? Jason?
Right on. Cartons. So this was a great story, I think, about how you might add a new material to your mix. And so, first off, just to hit it hard, yes, cartons are recyclable. They have a number of domestic markets. They've got well over 100 international markets. There's really long fiber in these packaging types, and so very much so. Great markets, very recyclable. And just a quick piece of history on it, a group called the Carton Council, which is made up of the major carton manufacturers servicing the United States, has been working on this issue since 2009. And back then, about 18% of the households around the U.S. had access to a program where they could recycle cartons, where they actually put it in their collection container and it would end up somewhere to be recycled. And I believe now it's up to 52% and still climbing. And they've done it by making sure that they covered all parts of the system. So they started working with markets to be sure that those were going to be sound and solid. Then came back to the material recovery facilities, the MRFs, and helped them figure out how they could sort these cartons out and into their own grade or into appropriate mixes. And then they went to the communities that fed into those MRFs and helped them figure out how to educate. So it's a nice success story on here's how you can add an emerging packaging type or a new packaging type into your mix. And if your MRF or community doesn't accept cartons yet, they've even got a website that's geared toward recycling professionals. So it speaks to probably the folks on this webinar. It's cartonopportunities.org. And from a messaging standpoint, taking a step away from the specific commodity cartons, I think that this is an interesting one to talk about the concept of not at this time. And what I mean by that is a long time ago, in the earlier days of recycling, some programs actually said, ooh, we don't want cartons. They specifically educated people, don't give us those things. That is not part of our mix. And then they added cartons to their mix years later, and they had to re-educate everybody. And so sometimes when you're talking about packaging types, just saying, not at this time. Do you accept them? Oh, not yet. Things are evolving. Not right now. Isn't a bad technique because it can ease the burden of re-education just a little bit. So just something to chew on.
Jason, this has been
Dan?
recycling. I just wanted to point out that this is an excellent example from a MRF standpoint on a manufacturer providing support in terms of identifying viable end markets, providing equipment for larger scale MRFs to divert packaging, and the educational materials that have come with this, to sustain and grow recycling rates. We look at Europe and Asia, aseptic packaging, very strong. And this is a great success story, Jason.
This is Phil, and it certainly was adding cartons was a win-win for us here in Philadelphia. And so not only did it allow us to put a new material in the program, but it gave us another opportunity to promote curbside recycling as a whole. And yeah, I agree. The Carton Council's approach was second to none. And so not only did they work with the area MRFs to help develop the infrastructure, but they also made outreach dollars available for when we added the materials. And just as a note, that is not me in that blue bucket there standing behind our mayor.
And this is Mike from Sunoco. We're a paper company as well, and I'd say for the paper industry as a whole, there's a lot of fiber in these cartons that have been ending up in the landfill for a long time. So as we expand the program and we get access to more homes, it becomes very valuable source of raw material for the paper industry. More mills are adding the capability to process this material. It can't be used everywhere, just like the upgrades we were talking about in the collection systems or in the MRF to process it. You need the mill to be able to upgrade some of their cleaning systems to be able to use this fiber. But access to that fiber that was previously going to the landfill is very important, because the recovery rates on so much of the other fiber commodities in the marketplace today are already quite high. And so to continue expanding and getting access to good quality fiber is important. So we're very big proponents of supporting this program, and we'll again echo the support from the Carton Council. They've been very, very good.
And are the aluminum and plastic being recovered as well?
It varies by location and mill. Quite often the plastic can be used as an energy source for the mill. The aluminum, depending on the process, can be recovered in certain circumstances, but a lot of it depends on the thickness of the aluminum and how effective it is through the process. So that's more limited than being able to use the plastics in there as fuel for the paper mill that's processing the fiber in the first place.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And Phil, I had always thought that you were the mascot for the Philadelphia Recycling Program. It's kind of like finding out there's no Santa right now. A little disappointed, but we'll move on. Pizza boxes. You can't recycle pizza boxes, right, Keith?
The corrugated cardboard is recyclable. The crusts are not. The issue here is the quality of what's left. But the empty and recycle message pulls through for cardboard containers, including pizza boxes, the same. As we see the packaging change to include more of a liner at the bottom that is disposable, then we see less grease hitting that OCC, that old corrugated cardboard for that OCC. And the result is that it's just really good material. And we see countrywide a real shift towards better inclusion of that in market. But I'd like to hear what Mike has to say. He's very focused on fiber.
Yes, again, for the paper mill side of things, that's a great way to put it, is empty and recycle. The fiber in the box is very good. The crust is not, the cheese is not, the grease is not, and especially when you're making food-grade packaging or anything that goes down the supply chain that way, you need to have good quality materials coming in. So as long as we can get the food out of there and those trays that have a grease-proof barrier to protect the cardboard, it's very good fiber, and we encourage communities to collect that. But it is a big part of the communication and the education in the first place to make sure that we get that part sorted out. The fiber itself is very good, and the paper industry is looking for as much of that as they can find.
And just to be clear, when we speak about crust, it's not part of the packaging, it's the actual pizza inside. So Ben, I think your advice would be just to eat all the pizza?
I think that's good advice, Karen.
Okay,
I think that covers the bases.
Excellent. Okay, so myth number 9, yes or no? The MRF can sort out anything. If it isn't recycled at the MRF, it just goes to the landfill, so no big deal, right? Just put it in the recycle bin, let the MRF sort it out. Mike?
Yeah, so similar to the conversation we had about large pieces of metal, or in this case you can see wood and some other materials here, it all comes down to that same issue of being able to process through the facility, keeping your workers safe. I mentioned that earlier when we're cleaning out screens, and obviously if big pieces come along, they can interfere with the operators in the facility, can have an impact on the quality of the end materials, which we led off at the beginning. And as Phil mentioned earlier, if you've got issues where you're shutting down because of this material, you can then create issues of being able to process all your material and even be able to accept it as the trucks are coming in if you get backed up. So it is very important that we're getting the right materials into the collection system so that we're protecting the workers, the materials, and the process so that everyone can be successful through this diversion from the landfill.
Excellent. Phil, any additional thoughts here on education?
Just that we don't work in vacuums, and so I think it's important that local governments have sort of participate in this process as much as possible, and remain concerned about material, not just when they tip it, but what happens to stuff as it goes through the processing systems. What's the quality? What are things that we can do to make it better? I think at the end of the day, in the long term, certainly that's something that maintains the viability of the recycling system, which is what we're all trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, at CVP we sometimes call this wish cycling, this idea of, you really just want something to be recycled so bad, so it just goes in anyway, and residents having their hearts in the right place, but not necessarily recognizing that not only does it create worker safety or hazard issues, but it also is the most it's the most expensive and the most environmentally taxing way to dispose of something, because now it has to be processed through the whole MRF system before ending up at the ultimate destination of the landfill, which is where it should have headed in the first place.
Yeah, and Karen, this is Jason, and Mike said, hey, this is kind of similar to the metal thing. And if you think back to the metal one, the bulky metals, Phil said, gosh, show a little bit of the process. Let people peek behind the curtain on your website. And, we've talked about that a little bit, that's a great place to share kind of some more in-depth information. And for this, again, videos and storyboards of the MRF process will play out really well. So for people who might be remotely interested in it, it'll give them a glimpse into really why they don't want to put everything and anything into those containers. And it also lends itself very nicely, just like you described, to a general short-term campaign. The better thing is to collect, sort, and recycle the stuff you want versus collect, sort, reject, load, haul again, and dispose of. And I think that's a simple enough message that people will cotton on pretty easily. So just a couple of light points to throw us back to the metal one again.
Thank you, Jason. Well, moving on to myth number 10. This is less about how to prep things to go into your cart and more about what does a municipality do or a county do when they go to tip something at the curb and find that it has a lot of contamination in it. Isn't good customer service meaning picking the stuff up no matter what's inside? Phil?
So I'd say that all too often the pressure has been, yes, to get things off the street. And so a little bit about Philadelphia. I mean, we were a city that was recovering less than 40,000 tons of recyclables per year 10 years ago, and now we're doing more than 125,000 tons. And, we were lucky in that our mayor, environmental issues were a key part of his campaign platform 7 or 8 years ago. And so he made the necessary investments in our program, which allowed us to expand and make operational changes like single stream and every week pickup and things like that. And I think throughout this process, though, I think it's fair to say that our focus has been on really promoting participation, and it sort of circles back to maybe the overall gist of the conversation that we need to pivot back and think more about recycle right and how do we maintain quality control of materials.
Phil, this is Ben Pettigo. I think one of the things we've done in the Midwest, working with municipalities doing recycling audit on designated loads just to assess residual rates in materials, seeing, of course, significant differences with curbside versus drop-off. Karen, to your point, and Keith, Jason, you've made this point, show folks the process, the mechanization. This particular photo is a single-stream material that is being conveyed into the Rumpke Cincinnati facility. It's sometimes hard to get an idea of the vast amount of material that we're dealing with. But, Phil's program in Philadelphia, 150,000 tons a year, that's a significant amount of material that's being diverted from the landfill.
And if I can just jump in on this, it seems like one where lots of us are geared up on it. Two quick things. Number one, we're on MRF number 10, and that lines up with 10 Lords of Leaping, which, I don't know, just seems cool to me for some reason. I want to see it. And the other thing is, this kind of thing, it just makes a great chance to educate. And we've talked a lot about the OOPS card. I like straightforward things that work. And so just a quick example. Chicago, you guys might have read, some of you might have read this recently, but Chicago started reusing an OOPS card approach, and I guess it was last month, 3% of their recyclers all received some sort of an OOPS notice about problems that were in their materials, and after only one card, 91% of those folks cottoned on and sort of cleaned up their stuff. Nobody wants to do anything bad, so they learned and they moved on, and so the stuff really works is the point of it. So it's a great chance to say, oh, hey, just so you know, this, not that, thanks, and it works.
And Jason, this is Phil, and that's certainly a tool that we use as well. We have been going back to the OOPS card approach, and we were pretty fortunate also that we have inspectors that are able to walk the beat in residential areas, especially in a densely populated city like Philadelphia. So that certainly adds another layer to our ability to keep contaminants down.
Okay, well, thank you. Those are excellent insights. It's interesting seeing how some of these myths, I think they could be standalone webinars all on their own. There's a lot of good information and great questions coming in as well. Moving on to myth number 11. Yes or no? Should city avoid contract clauses that allow loads to be rejected at the MRF? Mike, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think this comes back again to the same thing of being able to work together. You've got a number of different options that you can put into contractual language between the operator and the municipality. One could be that there is no ability to reject material, but then you're putting all of the risk and the costs associated with that on the MRF operator. You could get material in there that is really MSW or solid waste and not a load of recyclables, and then you're going to spend all the time and effort to either process it or divert it at the MRF to go to the landfill anyways. The other spectrum you could be, and you just allow open-ended rejections, and then you could get in the situation where if the MRF operator is backed up, they could reject loads just because they don't have the space for it or something to that effect. And that's really not the intent here either. So it's really around being very clear and communicate with both sides so that you're optimizing the total system. You're collecting as much material as possible in the municipality that can be processed in the MRF. And if we have things that are not cost-effective or create risks or other impacts at the MRF operating level, that should be very clearly defined between both parties so that there is a common interest of making the program a success. So it's really not one-sided or the other. It's, again, how do you work together to make the whole program a success?
So this is Phil. These types of clauses have not really been a big feature in our MRF contracts historically. We do have one now, and so my department operates its own collection fleet, and because we're so operationally focused, there's always been concerns that if we had clauses like this, it would cause delays at the plant and stuff like that, and then which add up to delays on the streets potentially. But negotiating a new MRF contract in post-green fence, I think, was a real eye-opener for us. And I think that it did take a lot of convincing to get the load rejection language into our MRF contract. But I think that that has helped us better understand and appreciate our own ability to affect recyclables quality, whether that's through better outreach or better crew training or better crew performance expectations. The one other thing that I would add is, it's important for both parties to have it's important that there's a protocol in place, that there's a process in place in the contract that clearly delineates, who's responsible for doing what and under what conditions is a rejection allowed to occur. And that's something that's really critical. And regardless of sort of whether you're a MRF operator or a city or a county, you need to have that in your contract.
Anything anyone else would like to add here? Okay, well, thank you for those points. We will move on then to our final myth of the day, and this is one that we hear pop up still, both around energy and also around just finances, around the balance of recycling. Does it even make sense to recycle? And this myth is, doesn't it take more energy to recycle than just to make things from new resources? Jason, do you want to hit on this one?
I would love to hit on this. So, on balance, for what's in the recycling stream today, there are significant energy savings in recycling versus manufacturing items from virgin materials. And let me say it another way, recycling helps avoid wasting energy relative to other kinds of manufacturing. And I think this really gets to the point about vitality, and I mean getting the public to believe in your program. So let's look at it from a communications lens. The environment really hasn't proven to be a great argument for growing recycling. It just hasn't motivated people. But avoiding unnecessary waste, that's something people are interested in. So you should always gear your methods to hit on whatever motivates your audience. Just like you should always choose your media. Are you going to go social media? Are you going to print stuff? Are you going to mail things, put things in the newspaper, focus on your website? You want to focus those based on where your audience gets your information. In other words, if there's one thing you remember about all of this, know your audience for sure. It's like the pivotal point in marketing. So avoiding unnecessary waste, that could become a good general positive message that you use across your materials, across your campaigns, regardless of what you're doing, and it hits right back on this question that does come up reasonably frequently from residents. So I guess that's how I see it, but I try and look at everything with a communications lens. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Jason, that we find that most people have heard the environmental message related to recycling, and those who were motivated by that message are probably participating. And if you're going to get to those sometimes recyclers, then you have to craft a different message. And the energy, the economics, the linkage to jobs and domestic manufacturing, those are all good messages that can help reach some of those audiences that are maybe on the fence or a little skeptical about participating.
And Karen, this is Keith. I'd add that this gets to the point you were making in the beginning, that if we're going to fight contamination and get better quality of recyclables, and remember it's all about, it's not just the quantity, it's the quality of the recyclables, then it needs to start first with the vitality of the program, the willingness of your community to want to engage, that they trust that their effort, even though it's a small effort putting something in the bin, but their effort is worth it, the time. And so when there are confusions in your community around the health and reality of recycling, disbanding some of the confusion around that first can help you then engage your public in their commitment, and then you can get to some of the quality concerns about what should and shouldn't be in the bin and the rinse and recycle message beyond that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Keith. So now, if there aren't any other comments from our excellent panel of speakers, we are going to move on to our quality contest. And I do realize that we only have about 8 minutes, I guess, left before we need to wrap up the webinar. I'm not sure how much time we'll actually have for questions. So we will be sending out a newsletter in 2015 that will be addressing the questions that came in on this webinar. So if you're not on our mailing list, you can email info@recyclecurbside.org or go to our website, recyclecurbside.org, and sign up for it. And we will be touching on all of the questions that came in a future newsletter. So don't despair if we don't get to your question. We will answer it and follow up. So speaking of newsletters, a few months ago, CBP sent out a quality newsletter. It was called Communicating Quality. And in that newsletter, we asked communities to send in examples of how they communicate quality. And we said that we would share those on this webinar and give the audience a chance to vote on which ones they think is the best. And the winner will receive a gift card from CBP. So we'll go ahead and jump into that now. The first example here is from Todd Scott, who's the custodial service manager with the University of Wyoming. And he said that the contamination issue they were trying to address with this approach was to keep people from using this bin as a dumpster for trash. They also wanted to encourage people to flatten boxes before placing them into the collection container. They felt this was successful because there's a bar across the lid that can be padlocked, preventing anyone who doesn't have the key from opening the lid and depositing the full trash bags. And the slotted lid also prevents people from putting boxes into the bin without breaking them down flat first, thus saving valuable space within the bin. Our second entry is from Marissa Perez Dormitzer. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name, Marissa, but she is with the Greater New Bedford, Massachusetts Regional Refuse Management District. And they have this card called Tips for Using Your New Carts. So with the rollout of New Bedford's great new automated collection program in June, there are many new recyclers who are not familiar with the do's and don'ts of the city program. Also, now that residents have a lot more room for recycling and less room for trash, the city was finding that they tend to throw in many non-recyclables. They often hear the common phrase, "It's plastic, it can be recycled," right? So this flyer was successful. It was developed and it's been successful because they have a clear message about the most common contaminants, which for their program are plastic bags, case wrap, polystyrene, food, heavily soiled pizza boxes, and clothing. And so here they have this in sort of a checkbox style. The next entry is from Lindsey Walker. She's recycling outreach with Emmett County in Petrosky, Michigan. And in this, there's a couple flyers that were submitted, so I'll show you two slides. And the first flyer, called Into at Bayview, this was an attempt to acclimate the seasonal residents of this affluent, seasonal, historic community that they have a dual stream recycling system, a two-bin system where people need to separate their recycling into paper boxes and bags and then mixed containers. Many of the seasonal residents come from single-stream, large urban communities, so they have to educate to separate to reduce contamination. Here's the second slide. The 3 flyers were successful because while we never really like to use the stick, we prefer the carrot approach. Letting customers know what they're doing wrong and educating them to change their behavior, it works for our community. Then rewarding them with a looking good sign, so this gets to the carrot approach of telling them when they're doing something right, is especially helpful. We like to recognize a great job. And then the last example is from Ursula Sarova, and she is with Sunnyvale, California, in their Solid Waste and Recycling Division. And this is a YouTube video that was developed, and it was to address the types of plastics commonly misunderstood to be recyclable in Sunnyvale. They've had positive feedback from residents and a high number of hits, so they feel like it's been successful at raising awareness. And I am going to very quickly show the first few seconds of this webinar, or I'm sorry, the video. And so the video goes on for approximately 2 more minutes, showing, and I apologize if you didn't have sound on the video, but the video goes for approximately 2 minutes and 30 seconds talking about the program and about the fact that not all plastics can be recycled by resin. So with that, I'm now going to switch over to the poll. And so you should be seeing a poll. Please go ahead and vote on who you think communicated quality the best. We'll leave this open for a couple more seconds. Okay, so I am now going to yep, we're almost there. All right, we're going to close the poll now. And it appears that the University of Wyoming, keeping trash out of their, here it is, I'll bring it back up, keeping trash out of their corrugated cardboard recycling container on the university property did the best job at communicating quality. So congratulations to them, and they'll be receiving a gift card from CVP. The last piece is just, again, to thank you all for coming. Thank you to our speakers. We really appreciate it. It was a fun session. We hope you had fun, too. There's a wealth of free resources. Check out our website. The Implementing Carts module will be coming online, too. You can join our mailing list. We have a lot of great resources, as mentioned, that are coming down the pipe. And we will be sure to take all of your questions, seeing that we're out of time, develop those into a great newsletter, and make sure that you will be sending that out to the list here as well so that you all have copies of that. So thank you again for your time, and have a safe and happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank you.